person today.
Yeah. And I'm Jana Menifee, and if you're in the Austin area, you know that we begin alerts all night about it's raining. It's very unusual for it to rain in Austin, so they had to wake everybody up during the night at 2, 4, and 6 to let us know it was raining. So nice of them to do that. We really appreciate it. And so that's why we have everyone on Zoom because it was telling everybody to stay home. So today, I mean, and also I wanted to mention, Jane was saying something, make sure you talk to professionals. The people we have in this room right here, the HR people we have in this room, they are the professionals, and you will get their contact information afterwards. So if you do have questions at all about anything that has to do with HR or anything else that we discuss here today, please contact any one of these excellent professionals that we have with us. They are here because they do want to help you. I mean, they are so generous that they are here today with it raining and getting all these alerts and everything, and they're still here with us today. So I'm really happy about that. So I'll go ahead and let's well, Bill, we should sit here in the room. I guess I can't forget you.
Good.
Good, and I do all the time.
I'm Bill Thompson, Associate Director of the Small Business Development Center here at Texas State University.
Great, and you're always here with us every month. And everybody that's here with us today, thank you so much for being here with us today. We so appreciate you coming month after month. So, Brian, since you're in the upper left corner, would you like to introduce yourself first?
Sure. Good morning, everybody. I'm Brian Levy from Treaty Oak Employers Law Group. I help companies when employees behave badly.
Brian is awesome. I can tell you, I don't know how many times I have had questions about HR and I've asked Brian, or I have a friend that has a business and they're having issues. And it's kind of like Brian is my go-to person. He is a lawyer, he's an HR lawyer, and he helps work with employers whenever their employees do behave badly. And sometime when you're offline with Brian, ask him about some of his cases. They are best. Hear what employees will do to their employers. Veronica, would you like to go next?
Yes, absolutely. Did you say Veronica?
Yes, I sure did.
Okay, just making sure.
Well, I
Veronica,
don't know. I could have been wrong. No. Yeah, okay.
yeah,
Sorry.
my computer broke out. That's technology for you. My name is Veronica Verhoff. My company is Evolve Up LLC. We are an HR consulting company that really specializes in fractional services and think technology. We do a lot of implementations, a lot of process improvement in order to help HR run effectively with their hiring, retainment, and use of workforce.
And one thing about Veronica, which I absolutely adore, and I find so fascinating when I'm talking with her, she uses a lot of AI in some of the stuff that she does. I mean, she is so high tech that she's out there on the cutting edge of everything that's HR. So that's why I really wanted Veronica here today for us to talk to about all this. So Carol, come off mute and introduce yourself, please.
Hi, everybody. Can you guys hear me okay? Mine is cutting out just a little bit. Okay, good. I am Dr. Carol Wheeler. I own NOPA Leadership. I do leadership consulting and training and development. I primarily try to help organizations stop losing really good people, particularly to bad management.
Yeah, thank you so much. So Carol is bringing on a different perspective for everybody. So she's like, because a lot of times we are losing our good people because we have poor managers, right? People are promoted to become a manager and we don't train them. We don't train them properly to be in that particular type of position. And having someone like Carol come in and help train your managers to be decent people. Otherwise, you're going to lose them. And it costs so much to do that. But before we get started, would you like to give us a poll?
All right.
And I'm sorry, panelists, you cannot vote. I know you would like to. So if we could have everybody please vote. What's your biggest HR challenge right now? Hiring, retention, performance management, compliance, or cost?
You can give it a more 10 more seconds.
While you're answering, again, let me remind everybody that these webinars are available for viewing afterwards on the SBDC's website, and that link will be provided to everybody at the end as well. And if you want to get into get on the newsletter for this Strategic Value Master Series, all you have to do is go to menifeellc.com and sign up for our newsletter. And we'll keep you up to date with what's going on each month.
Right. Looks like everybody has sent in their answers. I will end the poll now and share the results with everybody. There we go.
Catherine in the chat says her biggest challenge is OSHA compliance, which is definitely a challenge.
Interesting. So cost, so compliance is not as big. Hiring, performance management. Interesting. Okay, so this goes with our very first question. This first question is going to be going to Dr. Carroll. In your work, what's the single most expensive people problem you see organizations fail to address, and why does it persist?
You're muted, Carol.
Sorry, you froze on me for just a minute, so I missed
Okay, the
your
question is,
question.
in your work, what's the single most expensive people problem you see organizations fail to address, and why does it persist?
It's interesting that cost showed up on that poll as the biggest issue, because I think they're all so intertwined together, because the cost is often related to hiring, the cost is often related to performance management. All those things are so intertwined. I really do think the biggest people problem that we tend to have is related to that performance management and how people are performing at work to get the most out of them and therefore also keep them and keep them fully committed in their work. And I really do kind of what we talked about already, Jenna. I think that goes back to the manager. All the research says over and over again that people's commitment and engagement at work, the primary driver of that is their direct manager. And as organizations, that is the place I think we want to pour the most effort into. So one of the things I see a lot of organizations do is they do these big engagement surveys and they figure out where the issues are, and then they put the ownership for that engagement on each individual manager because we know the manager is the driver of that. But we're just saying to the manager, you need to fix this on your team without going, how do we need to pour into that manager? How do we need to train and provide support to and do all of these engagement tactics with that manager? We see often that how engaged and committed the manager is a direct correlate to how engaged and committed their people are. And so I really think that managerial layer is one of the biggest people problems that I see people or see organizations struggling with, and the place where we can make the biggest difference by just figuring out how do we pour into them and train and support them.
Brian, I was seeing your head shaking yes as Carol was answering. It sounds. Is it what was going through your mind?
Yeah, I absolutely agree with Carol. Giving frontline managers just words instead of actually training them on the concepts. Most of the big cases I see are because the frontline manager didn't escalate a situation because either they didn't recognize that it was problematic, that, it could lead to a claim of retaliation or it could lead to a claim of discrimination. And a lot of companies rest that on the frontline manager without giving the proper escalation process. And the company absolutely needs to know if the employee is complaining, they're not being treated fairly based on their race, their religion, a disability. And I think disability is the one that comes up the most often in my practice. There's a combination of a disability, a Family Medical Leave Act issue, and an employee's performance. So the employee's having a performance problem and they start making a claim about a disability, I need an accommodation, and the frontline managers don't make the proper escalation to HR or to legal. And so I think exactly what Carol was saying is pour into your frontline managers because they are the first level of leadership, and they really represent the company's position to the lower employees more than any other thing you do with your workforce.
Veronica, so in your line, what is it that
Yes.
you do to help get these things escalated? What is it that you do to help with these frontline managers? Because I know you do a lot with the processing side of HR.
So a lot of these systems that are put in place help enable managers to make the right documentation, to Brian and Carol's point. If you think about, we'll take the performance management conversation and the timing that someone might have FMLA. When those two things cross, the lack of documentation can put the company more at risk. So we have a client we're currently working on that had to settle with an employee that thing just happened. They're a small company. They're 50 people and below. And they don't have a lot of systems in place fully. Therefore, they didn't document any type of performance management. It was all done verbally. And some other things were happening. And so, what we do is we systematize things. We look at what documentation you don't have, and we think through what may create a lot of risk that Brian may see. And then we put that documentation parameter in place in the system. So imagine putting an HR system in place and then imagining the first conversation you have getting a follow-up email. Where is that stored if a manager is sending a follow-up email to an employee that says, hey, here's something we talked about. Here are the action items I have. Great. Where are you storing that? And then if it becomes more formal, what is the formal first written notice? Okay, where is that stored in the system? And then if you have to move into a performance improvement plan for that employee, great. Here's the template. We put that template in place. We store it in the system. So a lot of these systems are mature. They already have those templates in place that you can just turn it on. When companies have to go to someone like a Brian is typically when maybe everything is distributed or done verbally and it's not stored. So when we think about workforce optimization instead of systems, we try to find systems that are mature enough for that stage of small business or mid-sized business. We put it in the environment to make those steps very easy for a manager to be able to document over time.
So Brian, all right, let's go to you then. All right, what are the major legal loopholes or legal issues that most employers do not know about that they get caught up in?
Yeah, and I think that's
What
exactly
are
what I
they?
was thinking when I heard Veronica talking is you can have great systems, but if you don't follow them, that's what employees' attorneys are looking to hang their hat on. Um, like she said, if you have a verbal conversation, you don't do the proper documentation, that becomes a lack of evidence that the employee's attorney is going to use to say, look, there was no warning. You have in your handbook that there's a progressive discipline policy, but you didn't do progressive discipline with respect to my client, and therefore it looks like discrimination, even when it completely wasn't. This employee was underperforming. You talked to them about it 10 times, but you were trying to be nice and you didn't want to write it down because you didn't want to hurt their feelings. So it's really important to have those policies that Veronica, it seems like Veronica's really helps companies do that, but also taking it to the next level and making sure that you follow your own documented policies and procedures, especially with regard to progressive discipline.
All right. So my next question, I'm going to stick with you, Brian, for just a second.
Sure.
And it's 1099 versus W-2.
I spend a lot of my
Same thing.
time. Yes. I spend a lot of my time doing that with companies, and in smaller businesses, there tends to be a belief that anybody can be a contractor, and there is actually rules about it. And unfortunately, I don't get to decide if it's an employee or a contractor, and the business owner doesn't get to decide if it's an employee or independent contractor. Ultimately, the IRS is going to make one determination. The Texas workforce is going to make another determination, and they don't necessarily use the same standards. So I have clients that have gone through a DOL audit where the DOL said, we're not really interested in your employee contractor determination. We just want to make sure you're paying all the hours that people are working. And of course, you don't pay overtime to contractors. But while the Texas Workforce Commission is really concerned with you paying the unemployment tax on the state level. So you have different organizations that are using different standards, and you might not get caught by one, you might get caught by the other. But ultimately, take a take a deeper level understanding about what an independent contractor is. And the easiest way to think about it is this person performing a function of my business that is essential? And so the essential function test is not the only, like, the end all be all, but I think that's where a lot of small business owners make the mistake, is they say, okay, well, I have a trucking company and all these truck drivers that work for me are independent contractors, so I don't have to pay their FICA withholdings and I don't have to pay their unemployment taxes. It's because it's better for me to call them contractors. And you are definitely allowed to do that. However, you don't ultimately make the determination at the end of the day. So when it generally comes up is a disgruntled employee, they go to a lawyer or they go to the internet and they start thinking about, am I was I wrongfully terminated, or how can I get back at my employer? And the easiest way to do it is if they're not paid all their hours or they're not paid overtime for hours that they worked over 40 hours in a week. And it's not a problem until it's a problem. Did I answer your question, Jana?
Yes, and we kind of had that discussion before. And my recent hire, she's a W-2. I'm not even going to take the chance. It was just like, we're doing a W-2. I don't know if Dusty Lucy's on today, but Dusty, if you're in, please say something in the chat. Because when I did my W-2, immediately what I did was I called my good friend Dusty and said, I need some workman's comp insurance in case she gets a paper cut. So I had to do that. Oh, Dusty, yes, yes, he is here. Oh, great, thank you. Yes, and yeah, he was awesome. I got my insurance with Dusty while we were at our respective happy hours. So he did it during happy hour on a Friday afternoon. He got me the insurance that I needed. So Dusty, thank you so much. Thank you for being such a wonderful person and helping out. So anybody you go to a W-2, go to Dusty. He can set you up. He's amazing. Veronica, so how do you help in this situation? What kind of systems do you put in place to help them identify 1099s versus W-2?
I think 1099, if you do a contractor, they really need to be a contractor. A lot of the time, 1099 employees, I know, and a lot of our client sites will also have other jobs that they're doing. They might be coming in part-time, they manage their own hours, but they're a true consultant. So they have an expertise and they come and advise on that expertise, and they have a job that they execute, and the management's very high level management. Now, if you're dictating things in our client site that they must be online 8 to 5, you're supplying laptops, you're supplying certain specific things, and you're telling them from A to Z what they're doing in their job, and you're telling them certain ways to behave, certain values to do. That is more or less functioning in the way that it's defined as an employee. So there's very different things that typically we see in our client sites that say, that sounds more like a FTE W-2 employee or someone that you need a W-2. Okay, yeah, that's right. That's a 1099. You're using them more as a strong consultant that's executing work. And so it does feel and look slightly different when we come into those client sites. And we've had people accidentally mistake putting W-2 on that they're actually treating them like a consultant. So we've actually flipped them out and like, hey, they have multiple jobs, They don't have an 8 to 5 job. You're not dictating the work, you're assigning the work, they're executing and turning in, and it's little management. So in these specific cases, when you're converting from 1099 to W-2, you got to think about what you're defining to them, and we put policies in place. And as they come into your world, there's things that you need, like anti-harassment. You have to look up state and federal different types of things to look at. You have to look at employee handbooks. And so we help set up and templatize those. Now, because there are legal ramifications, we always advise to find someone like a Brian, that once you have your policies written, your anti-harassment training, your different employee handbooks, state and federal things that you need to think through for a W-2, we always say, make sure if you don't have legal counsel, find someone like Brian to review it. Because from an HR standpoint, we'll help you put that all up. But there are legal risks that often change that someone like a Brian would need to know. So if you're going to move over a 1099 to a W-2, you're going to want to put that all in place. But then you're going to want to use someone like a Brian to review it to make sure legally that it's all written in a way that if an employee came back on you, you have it all standardized.
All right, Carol. So when leadership is weak, how does this translate into the kinds of disputes that end up on Brian's desk and some of these other things that are going on that have been mentioned? But we got to get you unmute first.
Unmute.
Sorry, I'm trying to avoid background noise when I'm not talking. But so when I'm listening to Brian and Veronica, one of the things I'm thinking about is that one of the things that happens, Veronica sets up all these beautiful systems. You've confirmed with Brian that they are in place and legal and correct. But now all those systems have to be communicated really well and consistently reinforced with your people. So we've got to train your people and make sure that they understand not just that the systems exist, but why they're so important. So one of the things that happens a lot in workplaces, people don't contribute to systems or participate in systems that they don't see the point in. So we've got to make sure, right? People will just avoid them. They'll be like, well, that's not really that important. So when the leadership knows it's really important, they've spent the money and the time with Veronica and Brian to make sure everything is correct, but then they skip the step of training the employees on why it matters. Then we miss the actual implementation at the manager level of making sure all those things are happening on a regular basis. So I think that's one of the things I see in kind of that when leadership is weak, that's going to end up with things on Brian's desk. I think the other thing is that, I talk a lot in my work about the idea that for true commitment, you need both clarity and connection. And so that clarity is understanding the rules and the expectations and what needs to be done. But the connection is that relationship between the leader and the people that they are working with. And when that connection is weak and everything is solely based on rules and expectations, people are much more likely to be disgruntled and to end up on Brian's desk because they just assume that the way their manager addressed something is wrong. And so helping leadership figure out both that how do we make sure we know the rules and the expectations, but also how do we just be a nice person and have a good relationship with somebody and check in on them and have some connection with them, can also, when things are just a little bit wrong, that connection can smooth over and help people figure things out at a much lower level without it getting escalated to a Brian or to a major legal issue.
So Bill, I haven't been ignoring you, but let's talk about the SBDC. What do you think?
Well,
Well, Jane thinks I've been ignoring you.
yeah.
So
When we see small businesses come in, they're usually coming in with a mom and pop, or they may have 2 or 3 employees, and they don't understand the complexity of human resources. And all the advisors at SBDCs are generalists. And when you start talking about HR, you really need a professional all the way from setting up your system to your hiring. How are you going to hire, getting the right people on the right bus, all the way the compliance with workforce solutions and IRS is extremely important. And also Carol's point that when how do you communicate to somebody? Some people communicate differently than others. Some people listen to different than others. And it's really important to understand how somebody takes, some people are strong D. This is coming from the DISC, strong D. Some people are intuitive. Some people are S and some people are C. Knowing how to communicate to the person is also critical. It's a really complex process of HR that's multifaceted, that you really need a professional, somebody who does it on a day in and day out basis, because I do not. And so I'm really glad these guys are here.
Oh yeah, yeah, definitely, definitely. And you made a point that made me think about something. It's like, how people say treat others as you want to be treated, which is wrong. Whoever said that, we need to take that out of the memory of every database. Is we need to start treating people how they need to be treated, right? And does that ever become an issue um, from an HR standpoint? So, Carol, you we're talking about how well people communicate with each other, and I'm a great believer that we need to learn to communicate people at the level where they are, not necessarily what we think they should know, but based on how they receive information and things of that sort. Do you run into that a lot, Dr. Carroll? Oh,
Muted still.
there we go.
I'm so sorry. You cut out on me just a little bit. I'm having a little internet issue. Can you ask me that question one more time?
Sure, sure. See if I can bring it back up. So we hear all the time, treat others as you want to be treated, which I say should be just removed from every database ever. Because I really believe that we need to treat people how they need to be treated. How do they receive information? How do they process information? Things of that sort. If you could comment to that.
Yeah, absolutely. I think you're exactly right. And that's, some of the work that I do is helping managers understand their teams better and understand where each of their people are coming from. I have used DISC. I often use an assessment called Strengths Finder or Clifton Strengths for that process. But one way or another, we need to help managers understand how their people receive and take in information, what motivates them, what gets them going, what about the mission of the organization is going to actually get them excited and interested. I could not agree more, Jana, that like we need to get rid of the idea of treat people the way you want to be treated. It's got to be treat people the way that they want to be treated, the way that they're going to best respond. I think that's a critical point.
Are there any legal issues with that, Brian?
Well, yes, certainly, but I think what the way I think of that rule, it's the difference between the golden rule and the platinum rule. So that's kind of what I was running through my mind when you said that. And so the legal issues that come up when you treat people how you want to be treated is they don't understand the policies. And if you have policies in your organization you expect your employees to follow and they don't make sense to them, either because you don't understand the actual function they perform on the ground, or because it's just an impossible rule to follow based on the dynamics in that workplace. I think that's where Carol could add a lot of value, and where I see a lot of things land on my desk is because you didn't actually communicate what you thought you were communicating, from the higher level managers to the frontline employees.
Veronica, I saw you frantically writing notes that you were going to say. What are your thoughts on this?
Um, I think there's two truths here. I think when we think about value creation, the reason why value creation inside of a company is so important is it explains behavior. So if I say the word excellence, everybody be excellent. I might say to be excellent, I'm going to be a fast runner. Or in order to be excellent at work, I'm going to document every single thing that I do, which may or may not create value. And we talk to companies about explaining the behaviors that you need inside your workforce. What is excellence? What is integrity? What kind of culture do you need? And then when you interview, you talk to those employees about those behaviors, because the behaviors will define how management interacts with the employee population, and employee population is supposed to interact with management. If you don't define it at all and nobody understands how to behave, everybody's going to have different definitions of how to be treated. And so when you say respect, when a manager speaks respectfully, what are the behaviors you need? What is your tone? How are you leaning? What are your behaviors? Does that come off aggressive or not on that individual? Now, if you don't take time to define all of this, then the treatment of individuals across both the management side and the employee side are left up for interpretation. And then I think that that's when it's brought up to Brian and it puts people in an uncomfortable area. The one thing we don't want to do is bring in all of the employees' expectations and think that management has to foster that type of behavior that's going to put risk on the company, that's going to put the risk on liability for them, and then honestly is going to breed toxicity, and then honestly can breathe other things. And a company can close if in the event they don't define it, and it's toxicity across it. Now, I do agree that there's two truths here. There's the golden rule, but if you have policies and behaviors, those do need to be taught. They do need to be defined. They do need to be clear so that Brian can do his job, so that Carol can come in and do training and development for management. If it's not defined at all, then I do think that it's going to put companies at risk, right? So I think there's two truths here, two truths.
And when you're talking about company risk, thank you, Dusty, for putting something in about risk. Because that's the whole thing about insurance. Insurance is risk mitigation, right? We're trying to mitigate any type of risk that we might have. And so always talk with your insurance agent, like what Dusty put here in the chat about the practice liability insurance, employment practices liability insurance that he has put in there, because that's real important. It's not about how much does it cost. That's not the important issue that you should have, the discussion you should have with your insurance agent. What you should be talking with them is about risk. What is the risk management that we need to be thinking about? Not so much the cost of the insurance, but what kind of risk are we trying to cover over? So thank you so much, Dusty, for adding that in there. Should we put into a chat? So we've got a chat prompt. Please put it into the chat, or you can write it in there, right?
Yeah.
Okay. So, go ahead.
Oh, so thumbs up if in the chat if your turnover rate is higher than you'd like it to be. There you go. We have a few thumbs up floating.
Yeah, a couple of floating. Got some people.
One thing I'd like to reemphasize that Carol said, is Disc Finder and the Clifton Strength Finder are really good tools for managers to use to understand their employees and how to communicate with those employees and where their strengths and weaknesses are. I've done both of those, and it's really very enlightening.
Does the SBDC offer those services to help people understand it?
That's above all what we offer.
But I know personally.
I did it personally.
Yeah, you can do it.
Yeah, I did it personally. How about the book on Clifton's? In the back of it, it has a thing so you can do your Strength Finder.
Let's talk a little bit about, so we didn't have a whole lot of people that were saying that turnover was an issue, but let's talk about it anyway, because I think that is an important issue of how well we treat people, because we do want to keep good people. I mean, when we have to replace them, the cost of that is so high. So Carol, you said that organizations don't lose people to bad pay. They lose them to bad management. What does a management worth staying for actually look like in practice?
I think a manager worth staying for most people, looks like somebody who sees, knows, and values their people. So when you have a manager,
right? That is so simple, but it's I love that statement. That's all you need to put that on a piece of paper, put it on your laptop so that you can see that every day, because that statement is so priceless. Thank you. Sorry.
no, that's okay. You're right. It's that simple. It's that simple to say, but it's not that simple to implement. right? Particularly because, we talked earlier about we don't necessarily train managers. What we do most often is we promote managers who are great individual contributors. And then we're like, all right, go be a manager. And that manager still thinks their job is to get the stuff done. The biggest transition that managers have to make is realizing that their job is now to see, know, and value their people, not to do the actual tasks. Um, and so I think that's a manager we're staying for is someone who really sees, knows, and values their people on a regular basis. And people will do almost anything for a manager that does that. I said on there that people don't leave because of bad pay. Here's the reality is that pay and benefits and all of these things are what we call in the leadership literature demotivators. What that means is as long as I feel like I'm being paid fairly, pay is neutral. And if I get a raise, I'm extra motivated for maybe a week or two, maybe a month, and then that's the new normal and pay is back to being neutral. If I feel like I'm not being paid what I'm worth or that I'm not getting the benefits that I deserve, then pay is a demotivator and it will tank my motivation. But pay and benefits don't typically help people be really motivated. That takes a really good manager who sees, knows, and values them.
Veronica, I see you just keep shaking your head. Yes, yes, you have some thoughts on this.
Yeah, yeah. I agree, see, know, and value, but you have to now define the behavior. So this goes back to behavior. What is see? What is know? What is value? And to Carol's point, you can't train an individual contributor to know that. So what do you need to put in place to help them? These are people at the end of the day, they've never led, they've never managed. How they are seen, how they are known, how they are valued are totally different. So you have to define it as a company. Maybe to value your employees, every manager is expected to do a one-on-one, and in that one-on-one conversation, finding out the bottlenecks of that person's job, clearing the road for that person to be better resourced to do their job effectively. Maybe it's monthly performance check-ins to where they're tracking their goals on an ongoing basis and making sure that that person's doing work that the employee values, because some of the time we have administrative things, we have things that we don't value in our jobs. So what does that look like? If you think about talent reviews that you do on a quarterly basis in order to see if it's tied towards a certain metric. What are they doing day in and day out? So when we say see no value, you can't just say see no value. It has to be defined and a system has to be put in place for that manager to be able to do their job. Because if you just say at a small business, okay, I have this one manager that's now leading and there's nothing for them to use to help guide them and there's no training in place, that see know and value is going to be up to that manager's interpretation, and then we're going to land it wrong. So when a company says, how do we see our people, how do we value our people, and they put systems in place and documentation in place and then teach the manager how to do that, you're going to end up retaining those employees that identify and you get that feedback that they feel seen, heard, valued.
Brian, does any of this, the things that we're talking about right now, are any of those ever an impetus for someone to bring something to your desk from this?
Yes, absolutely. And everything that Carol and Veronica said is kind of leading to exactly the same place. It's when you promote the person who's really good at the job to being the manager and they're not trained to be a manager. It creates stress for that person, and then that person may you know not express themselves properly. And what's not discrimination or harassment can feel that way to employees, and that can lead to claims, right? So if you have a manager who doesn't recognize the values of each employee because they weren't trained to, then they're probably treating people differently. And they're probably not doing it because of race or religion or any of the protected characteristics. But when you have a person that fits into one of those categories, it looks like it because of the way they're communicating without having the proper training to make those communications in line with what the organizational needs. So they're probably getting pressured. Like, you need your people to be out there selling this much per month, for instance. And so the manager's like focused on people who aren't selling well. And because they're not trained in helping that person be lifted up to like raise and train their skill sets, because the skills came easy to them. They were great at their job, and now they don't know how to communicate the way to improve that employee's underperformance. All they focus on is you're not performing. And so that's what leads to things landing on my desk from that perspective.
Right. We only have about 15 minutes left, and I want to make sure that we bring in AI, right? That seems to be the one thing that everybody likes to talk about right now, including me. All right, so I'm not not just me. So Veronica, I did introduce you talking about AI. So how are you bringing AI into the HR side of the business?
AI is already there. I just show up and try to help. So at this point, all different sizes of companies, small, mid, large, everyone is talking about technology and speed of productivity, efficiency, automation. And I tell everyone, slow down for a second. It's a lot of hype. Let's not purchase things and just throw them into your environment. All of these basic things we're talking about, these foundational things need to be put in place before you launch any type of technology, including AI. If you think about documentation, onboarding, how you onboard, templatizing, standard operating procedures, think, make sure you have things and workflows in place, and then find your bottlenecks. When I talk about bottlenecks, we'll use hiring specifically because that's very easy to run through on where you can adopt AI. Instead of hiring, let's say you have a job posting, and this happens all the time. You post up the job and you have 100 applicants, 100. And I can't tell you how often this happens. You have to then read through all of those. Well, now that's now taking X amount of hours of time. And if you have 3 or 4 job openings and you're a small business, it's sucking up someone's time or a couple of people's time or a handful of people's time to manually read through all of that. So when we talk about AI, we start with where are the bottlenecks and where's the time? And if you're a small business and it's spending someone 80% of their job to read resumes, that is a good place to look at. That machine learning can read that and match to your job very easily. And there are tools that do that. This same methodology goes through all of HR. When you think about redundancy, things that you're doing over and over and over again, are you sending the same onboarding email over and over and over again? Well, you can templatize that and automate that. A human doesn't have to do that. So when we talk about AI, first we'll start with what needs to be improved when we're looking at redundant things, things that could be automated, things that are administrative that AI can adopt. AI is an umbrella statement, and there's different things that solve for different problems. So we look at what's the best solve. I talked about machine learning earlier that can read resumes and do matching. I've talked about automation. What can we automate to where an employee doesn't have to create an email? There's also generative, where we see this in Gemini. If you're in Google Workspace, that you can just have Gemini write your email for you. So what kind of AI can write it for you? And we also see LLMs. And so also within LLMs, where are we pulling that data? Inside of HR, the way that we're seeing shown up is in our small business, but close to mid-market. Someone on the HR side might be answering very basic, redundant policy questions on benefits. An AI bot can usually plug in to your data and answer those very basic informations by just pulling out information instead of a policy or benefits and offering it up. So when we look at AI and what we solve for, we don't start with the AI technology. We actually start with the problem first. We identify that problem first, then we bring in how AI can solve it. 9 times out of 10, if someone has implemented an HRIS or an ATS that has AI in it and it bottlenecks, they give us a call after the fact. And then we ask them this question: how did you pick the tool? And they said, oh, I either used it or, oh, someone saw it and, oh, I implemented it. And they forgot to think about the problem they were solving for. So they purchased a tool, implemented it, and it really didn't solve the ongoing problems in the business. And so really start with the problems, work backwards.
Oh, that is excellent. Excellent. Like Bill and I always talk about that too when we're working with startups, right? If you're trying to start a business, first thing you want to do is identify the problem of your target market. Are you solving a problem? That always should be first. Carol, I got a question for you. How do you prepare managers and their employees when you're trying to implement AI? How do you get the managers to bring that on and communicate to their employees how AI is coming in? Because they might be afraid of it, right? They're saying AI is coming in, taking all of our jobs, right? Or something of that sort. So how do you work with managers and employers about implementing AI?
I actually think a lot of it goes back to the way Veronica was explaining this, because when we are really clear about the problem that we're using AI to solve, then it's much easier for us to work with employees and say, this is AI's job. This is your job. This is why you're safe. This is what only humans can do in our business. And this is what we need you to focus on. So I think, with AI, there's sort of two things that we need to do. One is like on this seen, known, and valued, part of what employees need to hear right now is we still value you. We think you're important. We have a job for you to do that AI is not going to be able to take over. And I think to Veronica's point earlier about behaviors, each business, that's going to look different for each business. And each business needs to get really clear on what that looks like in their business. What are those specific behaviors and messages that they want to be conveying? But for the employee, we need to handle both sort of the emotional and the practical side of like helping them feel confident that we still value you. And part of that is on the real practical side, helping them distinguish between this is what we're bringing AI in to do, and this is what you still need to be able to do. This is what only you can do. And that's the part we need to be focusing on. I think the other thing, and Brian may have something to say about this, but I think the other thing with AI that we need to be paying attention to is organizations need to be able to say to employees, this is where we don't want you using AI, because employees have access to AI tools that aren't coming directly from their organization. And so they may be implementing things on their own just to try them out. And so organizations being clear on where they don't want AI to be used in their organization is going to be as important as where they do.
Right. Brian, I know that you've already been adding to the chat, but what
Yeah,
are the
I
legal
totally
issues?
agree with that. I do a lot of non-compete and trade secret litigation, and if you are allowing your employees to put confidential information into AI and you don't have a policy against it, then the court is not going to help you protect that information when you come and ask them to. So I would be very specific with your employees about when and when not they're allowed to use AI. And Rhonda was mentioning this in the chat. Not only will the court not protect your confidential information, but theoretically, your great idea is being absorbed by that company, depending on what the terms of service with the particular AI that you're using. You can be actually giving them your idea. And the other really important thing I wanted to bring up about Veronica's point is that the EEOC has made very clear that using an AI screening tool does not prevent you from a discrimination claim, right? So you don't know how that AI tool is evaluating people. And if it just happens to knock off every person of one protected characteristic, and you don't know that, you're really exposing yourself to a claim of discriminatory hiring that you may not even know about. And that is really one of the biggest concerns about AI hiring tools is make sure you understand who's being not selected and why. So as it might save you a lot of time, just spend a few minutes looking at the rejections to see if there's a pattern that is illegal.
Someone did bring up a question in the chat, and I think that's one that we need to talk about a little bit with you, Brian, is that recording of when we record. I know that within the state of Texas, you only need one person to do a recording. If you're in Florida, you need to have two people. Could you talk about note-taking AI?
A lot of
Miguel.
people are using note-taking AIs right now, and it's not necessarily problematic. As you mentioned, Texas is a one-party consent state, so if you're a party to the conversation, you can record it. But as a business owner, you can also make it a rule, a policy of the company not to use AI note takers. But the other consideration is, why is that employee recording the conversation, right? It can cause cultural issues in your company if everybody thinks that somebody's recording, like one employee is recording the calls. Why are they doing it? And I've had clients where this is an issue and they go and talk to the employee who's recording it, and it's because they're maybe have dyslexia or dysgraphia, and taking notes for them is hard. And then once other employees understand that, then they're not so concerned that this employee is recording everything to document punishment or wrongdoing by them. But on the other hand, as a business owner, maybe you don't want that AI gaining access to everything you discuss in your meeting, especially strategic planning meetings. So again, the terms of service of that particular AI would be important. So is the information being uploaded to a server, or is it just on that device being stored and not shared from there? So really understand the AI terms of service and make sure that you are choosing the right products for the right situations. Did that
Awesome.
answer the
That's great.
question?
Yes, you did. It was
Oh,
perfect. Thank you. As always, you always do such a great job. All right, so we're in our last few minutes. So what I always like to do at the very end is ask everybody to say, what's the one takeaway you would like everyone here to take away? So anybody that's watching this webinar today or later, what's the one thing you would like for them to take away from this discussion? And we'll start with Bill.
Well, the first thing came to my mind is set up your system. Have your system set up, have your SOP set up before you hire somebody so you can hire to them.
Yeah, I agree.
That's one thing.
Right. And
Right.
problems, right? Identify problems,
Right.
right? Yeah. So let's see. Let's go the reverse order. Then we start with Dr. Carroll. What is the one thing you'd like people to take away from here today?
Um, I hope that you're taking away that being really intentional about your processes and your systems and your training is what will not only make you successful, but keep you out of trouble, right? You need both of those. You need to be really intentional about how you're setting everything up and how you're encouraging behavior on the part of employees and how you're training them to behave and to act and to respond. And that will help them stick around. It'll help with turnover, help with performance management, and it'll hopefully keep you out of Brian's office.
Veronica,
I
what's the
like
one thing
to,
you like people to
I like to keep you out of Brian's office. That's great. I think the takeaway here is start with the basics. There's no reason to get fancy. So we start with foundation for these small companies that are one, two people. If you're doing a job, document what you're doing. For your first hire that you bring on, put in that employee handbook, right? That's going to help mitigate risk as you continue to grow and scale. Once you get to those fancy tools, as long as you have some workflows and processes that make sense, then you can implement those in those tools. And once you get those tools in place, make sure they're secure, especially when it comes to performance, conversations, compensation conversations. So you're just selecting the right tools. But if everything that I'm telling you, it's so basic, these basic things, once you put AI in, will function well as long as you have the foundation. So the key takeaway here is start with the foundation, work your way up to the fancy, shiny AI tools.
And Brian, what's your one thing you want people to take away?
I think it's ignorance is not a defense. So, and I mean that in the sense of really understand what you're doing. What policies do you need, and what do your policies actually mean on the ground for your people? What is the AI terms of service? What is this person a contractor or employee? Like you can't just make a determination and think, oh, okay, well, I'm good because I don't really know the difference, so that protects me. The standard of proof in civil law is quite different than what most people think. So, you know, don't don't put your head in the sand and think that that's going to save you.
Thank you so much. And I want to
Oh,
thank
and
everybody.
sorry,
Yeah.
Jen, if I one more thing. Please, you can come and talk to me before you have a problem. I add much more value than before it's too late.
that, that's probably the best point. Yeah, yeah, risk management. Talk about it ahead of time with people. Yes. But thank you everybody to my panelists, Brian, Veronica, Carol, Bill, Jane, especially Jane, for doing all this. And thank you to all of you that were here with us today. Thank you so much. You have choices in life and you can choose to spend your time someplace else, but we so appreciate you being with us here. And next month, July 20th, our Strategic Value Master Series will be back, rain or shine. We will be here, and it will be venture capital and investment funding. And we'll have Jeff Blickman from Palm Venture Studios with some additional panels with us next month. So I hope that you'll come back and join us again. Thank you, everyone, for being here with us today. And thank you, Casey and Dusty, for me calling you out unexpectedly. Thank you so much, Dusty.